In the Hawaiian Islands, we have thousands of different species of plants and animals in our mountains and in our streams and in our oceans. And of the thousands of species there, 90% of them are found nowhere else on the planet. So if you're going to protect those species, Hawaii is the only option for them on the entire planet. All you have to do is look at the names of the different plants and animals that you can find in the Hawaiian Islands, and you notice that they have a binomial nomenclature, just like scientific names of plants and animals. Ohia lehua is a two-named plant. It's a tree. It's a tree bearing the red flowers that are sacred to the goddess Pele. Ohia can be looked at as a generic name, the name of the genus, and lehua, the particular specific name. So there's ohi'ai, ohia lehua, ohi'aha. 3 different species of plants, all closely related to each other, and Hawaiians name them in a binomial nomenclature that's very similar to the way Western science names things. And in fact, if you look at Western naming systems and Hawaiian naming systems, there's so much congruence. That is, the names for plants and the names of the scientific nomenclature are very similar.
This is a noni tree. This was brought in by the Polynesians. This plant was useful for many reasons. At this stage, when it was completely white, it's still very hard and is not smelling. And it was used, it's edible but not very palatable, but it was used as a famine food. And notice the contortion. This is very characteristic because of the way it flowers and forms. At this stage, it was used as a poultice, and it was very good. What the Hawaiians would do is take a strip of tapa, twist it and form a little, let's say if you had a boil here, make a little well, fill it with this, and then wrap it with a piece of tapa paper, tapa cloth, which of course was their bandage. I have ki, called ki in Hawaiian. This was planted around the houses as a preventative for evil spirits too. In the treatment of a fever, they would take a leaf and split it down like that. Now I don't know what your family did when anybody had a fever or a headache or, as we say, sore head. But in our family, my mother would take a terry towel, fold it like this, get a bowl of ice water, dip it in there and put it up here. When it got warm and dried back, it would dip. The Hawaiians did exactly the same thing, but they didn't have to make ice, they didn't have to buy a bowl or get a terry towel. They would send the children down to a spring where the water, it was very cool. They would bring back this calabash and they would take this tea leaf and dip it in and put it up here. When it got warm and dried back, it would go again. Exactly the same thing. That fabric-like sheath at the base of the coconuts, especially as you go up above, it's pure white, only it has a sort of a gook on it that you have to scrape off. When you do that, you have a perfect cheesecloth, which they use for straining and for squeezing out things. The nuts were very important because of the fibers in the husk, which they made cordage out of. Of course, the flesh was grated and put in water, and for the oil, which the Hawaiians would rub their bodies with every day. Here is kukui, or in English, the candle nut tree. There are many varieties of these. This is the one with a very simple leaf. There's one over there with a maple leaf. Of course, in medicine, the raw kernel was used as a purgative. And as you know, if anybody's ever tried it, there's a nice little Hawaiian verse which says if you really eat rock a kui, you run, run, run. We usually wait across here when the tide's out. And the stream comes down there and was diverted, as it was told by several people, into, of course, this is a mangrove right here. And you see that's all mangrove there. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It falls directly into the water this way and then sprouts. And it bears very profusely, and that's why you see so much of it.
Okay, this is the popolo plant. It's the same. This plant is what the Hawaiians call popolo because of the black berries on them. This plant can be used in many different ways. First of all, you can use this for boils. It takes 5 days, and the boils, it'll take all whatever pus have inside of the boil, plus the roots and everything else, and seal the hole all at the same time. Yeah. They can also use this for people who has asthma. People that have asthma and has a hard time to breathe, you would either boil it or you would austerize it and drink it every day. That will help to get rid of the asthma. And the other thing this thing can be used for is when you have centipede bites. When you have centipede bites, you smash it up and you put it on top of the bite, insect bites, yeah? There are many uses for the Hawaiian plants. You can use them in many different ways. The Hawaiians use this banana tree whenever they cook stuff, cook things, yeah? It was not something that they ate. Of course, they ate the fruit, which just doesn't have any fruit, but they used the leaves to do their cooking on, besides the tea leaf. Yeah? And they would put this over the imo, just to keep the food from burning. Yeah? So they would cut the banana leaf, they would cut the stump, they would split the stump in half, take it apart, shred it, and spread it over the imo when they cook their food, so that the food wouldn't burn. It would more. What happens is, because this tree has a lot of moisture, steam would rise, and the steam alone would cook the food.
But there are many, many other species of Hawaiian plants that are becoming more and more rare. And unless we can keep their ecosystems from being completely overwhelmed by non-native plants and animals, these species are going to disappear. And it's going to be a much poorer world because we won't have those species with us. We won't even know, for example, whether or not a particular rare species might have an important medical use. We don't know what kinds of riches are disappearing in our Hawaiian ecosystems. And of course, many of these species also form the foundation of Hawaiian culture, so that someone can look at this uluhe fern and think, oh, that's a very interesting and pretty fern. And a Hawaiian will look at this fern and know that it can be used for thatching, that it can be used to make a hat, that this is the kino lau, that is the bodily form of the wife of Ku, Hina. And in fact, Hina on the Big Island, in the form of this fern, forms these huge, thick tangles. And if you're in the forest and you have bad intent, Hina is said to surround you in this form of this fern, and you never leave the forest alive. So all of this rich foundation of practical uses as well as stories and traditions might be lost if uluhe fern were to succumb to invasions by non-native plants.